Hello crafty friends, it's Jess from jesscrafts.com, and today I have a card for the latest Lawnscaping challenge. I'm on the Lawnscaping Facebook inspiration team, and so I'm sharing a card for the newest challenge, which is a color challenge and is asking you to be inspired by the rainbow. So I'm going to be doing some rainbow under the sea animals using the Critters in the Sea collection from Lawn Fawn. I thought about using the seahorse at first, and then I also was looking at the little fish in the collection. I thought that those two images were small enough that I could make one of each across and get the 6 across even in this small area. So I'll be using those a little bit later in the video, but for now I want to work on my panel. I'm going to be using a piece of white cardstock cut with the MFT Stitch Circle die, although the Lawn Fawn Stitch Circle dies are excellent too. I just happened to get these other ones beforehand. And so I'm taping that down to my work surface, and I'm going to be adding some distress ink. I'm using peacock feathers and mermaid lagoon. I'm starting with the peacock feathers, and I'm laying the peacock feathers all over this stitched panel, this stitched circle. And as I put it on, the tape really wasn't holding it down, but I didn't want to get my fingerprints in it, so I'm just using a napkin here to help me hold it down and get a full even coverage across it. Then I'm ready to add this stencil over it. This is the wave stencil from Simon Says Stamp, and I'm going to be pulling in the color of the mermaid lagoon from each of the sides. I really like to use 2 colors when using this stencil, because the white presents, if you leave it white, the background, it presents a really stark contrast, and I think it looks better if there's some color variation in the ocean. The ocean typically does have different colors of blue and green in it. It's not just kind of solid colored appearing, and so this lends itself to that. And so I'm just taking the Mermaid Lagoon on this mini foam ink blending tool, and I'm pulling it in from the sides. I'm not worried about getting even coverage in the middle, so that it will kind of create a highlight area in the middle where it's a little bit more of a faded look. Once I finish that circle panel, I'm ready to move on to the animals. I thought about coloring all of the animals in each color of the rainbow, but I decided that for this card I would stick with distress inks the whole way. And so what I'm doing is laying on a little bit of distress ink color all across a piece of white cardstock. And this is just going to create colored cardstock for me. So if you had scraps of each of these colors, you could just go for it and use it, but I actually think that it's a little bit easier in a way to use your distress inks to create exactly the color cardstock that you want, and then you don't have to be searching through your collection or your scraps to find it. And you don't have to, buy and stock as much of that sort of stuff in your craft room, because you could just make whatever cardstock you want with your distress inks. The colors I'm using in the rainbow are Barn Door for the red, Spiced Marmalade for the orange, Squeezed Lemonade for the yellow, Twisted Citron for the green, and Seedless Preserves for the purple. On the back of all of my ink pads, you see that I have my foam applicator right there, so I can just stick it on the tool. I only have about 4 of the tools, but I do have a foam pad for each of the colors that makes it a little bit easier, and so I can quickly access my inks, and like I said before, I find it to be a little bit faster than cardstock. So I'm going to now stamp the seahorse and the fish that I mentioned earlier. I tried to make the blocks of color large enough that I could stamp a seahorse and a fish, and then decide later which of them I wanted to use as I start placing them on the card. And so you see here on most of them I'm stamping more than one of the critters, so that ultimately I can choose as I place them. And now when I cut these out with the coordinating dies, which you see that I keep on a magnetic sheet in the same plastic bag as I keep the stamp set, I am not going to get the white border, even though traditionally that's what it does. It leaves a white border around all the critters, but because I'm using a solid piece or a solid colored sheet, there's no white border, and the color extends outside of the animals, which might not be what you're going for, but I actually kind of like it, as I think that if there was the white there, it would interfere a little bit with the rainbow order and rainbow coloring of this. So I decide to make the critters going from the top left to the bottom right. This is generally a pretty appealing sort of arrangement for a cluster of objects, because That is the way that we traditionally read. We read from in English from the top left to the bottom right, so things sort of make sense and flow for us well there. But as I was arranging it, I felt like it was a little bit, there was something missing. The pattern was a little too heavy, and I wanted it to look a little bit more random. And so I didn't want it to be like a steady pattern of seahorse fish, for example. And so I decided to add in that second green, or that additional green seahorse there. And I thought that that filled it out pretty nicely. And obviously I'm missing blue from the rainbow, but that's because I'm using the blue ocean. And so that was always my intent from the beginning, is to skip over blue and have the blue ocean filling in that color of the rainbow on my card. Once I have that arrangement, I'm ready to stamp a sentiment. I chose this Happy Summer sentiment from Lawn Fawn. I should have probably made sure in advance that it would stay, or sorry, that it would fit in the area left, but I figured that I would adjust my sentiment, or maybe add like a banner or an extra circle with the sentiment if need be. But since there was enough space to stamp it right in my circle, I decided to go for it, and I stamped that with some VersaFine ink, because it presents a really nice dark impression. Then I needed something to put my pattern, or put my little panel on, as I'm going to be mounting it onto a card size piece of paper. And I found two collections, the Hello Sunshine and pint-sized patterns, which have relatively white papers, but then they also have small dots of color. But one color, the one from Hello Sunshine, actually has the rainbows. And even though it's a little bit different, I don't know that rainbows quite go with Under the Sea scene, but I think because they both had that rainbow color in there tied in, it worked well. And so I decided in the end to go for that one, cut it to 4 by 5 1/4. And then I'm going to mount my stitch circle on there with a little bit of foam. This is really thin foam from the Dollar Tree, and while that's not particularly great for shakers, it's excellent for popping things up because it doesn't make your cards too thick for mailing, but it provides just enough that it's a little bit of interest and dimension. And so I cut that also out with a circle die, although you could hand trim it. I mounted my panel on, and that's it for my card today. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you're interested in more crafty videos, you can subscribe to my channel. I'll leave you links to the products in the video description below, but also to the challenge so you can join in and enter for your chance to win. The prize is sponsored by Lawn Fawn, and it's a free stamp set this week, so be sure to join us. Thanks for watching. Bye.